The desert stretched wide and merciless, the sky a pale dome where the sun pressed down with unflinching weight. Sagebrush twisted like old bones, and the wind carried grit that clung to lips already cracked from thirst. Amidst that endless loneliness, a woman lay in the dust, her hair matted to her forehead, her breath shallow as if each pull of air cost her something dear. Her name was Clara May Whitlock, a settler's wife who had been cast aside when her body betrayed her husband's dream of a strong, unbroken trail westward. That betrayal came in the form of pain, sudden and sharp, forcing her wagon train to halt in the midst of nowhere. Her husband had looked at her once, torn between pity and impatience, then mounted his horse. He did not return. By sundown, Clara was alone, her dress soaked, her cries swallowed by a sky too wide for mercy. Two infants had entered the world beneath that brutal sun, twin boys, their small lungs screaming into a silence that no human ear was near enough to answer. Clara clutched them both to her breast, her body trembling not only from the blood she had lost, but from the terror that her son's first sight of earth would also be their last. The hours passed. Coyotes began their circling. Hunger gnawed at her hollow stomach. She tried to whisper to the boys James and Eli, names chosen for strength. She prayed would root in them quickly. She whispered promises she had no breath left to keep. By dusk of the second day, Clara felt her spirit loosening, as if drifting upward to join the pale evening star. And that was when she heard the faint creak of leather, the pad of moccasins against sand. From the shadows stepped a figure tall and watchful, skin weathered by sun, eyes steady and quiet as dusk itself. He wore his hair into braids, a hawk feather tied at the end. Across his chest hung a bow, though he did not reach for it. Clara flinched, clutching her children tighter, but her strength was near spent. The man crouched before her, his gaze falling to the infants, then to her cracked lips. He did not speak her tongue at first, only placed a water skin at her side and gestured gently, urging her to drink. This was Wakantanka's son, known among his people as Chayton, a Sioux hunter moving through the desert in search of sign, food, and quiet. He did not expect to find a white woman broken and bleeding, her newborn sons pressed against her chest like fragile birds. Clara's fear was carved deep by all she'd been told, that the people of this land were merciless, that they took scalps, that to fall into their hands was to vanish into cruelty. But thirst overrode pride. She drank. The water burned her throat and revived her spirit enough that tears slid free. Chayton did not smile, but his eyes softened. He removed from his pouch a small bundle jerky wrapped in Haidan, tore a piece for her. He motioned again, patient as the moonrise. That night, he built a small fire shielded by stones and brush. Clara lay trembling nearby, her boys quieted by the sound of crackling flame. When coyotes neared, Chayton's bow whispered, and the night returned to stillness. She watched him from the shadows, torn between suspicion and gratitude. Why would he stay? Why risk himself for her when her own husband had left her for dead? Her mind spiraled with shame. She remembered the sneers of the women in town, whispering that Clara was too frail for the frontier, too delicate to bear the burdens of a rancher's wife. She remembered her husband's hardened stare, the way he measured her worth in how long she could walk behind the wagon without complaint. Now she was only a woman discarded, a body in the dust. Yet here was this stranger silent, watchful, tending the fire as though her life mattered. By dawn, her fever rose again. She drifted in and out, sometimes hearing his low voice in his own tongue, murmuring words like prayer. When her milk faltered, he searched for roots and berries, crushing them into a paste she could swallow. She thought she might die anyway, but then his hand steadied her shoulder, his gaze anchored her, and she willed herself to breathe again. Days passed like that. A slow tether began to form, not of words, but of survival. His gestures grew gentler, adjusting the blanket around her children, lifting her carefully when she was too weak to move. Each act landed in her chest like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of something she had not felt in years. Dignity, perhaps. When strength returned enough for her to walk a few steps, Clara saw the desert with new eyes. The brush no longer looked only like death. She noticed the way Chayton studied each plant, how he read the wind, how life revealed itself to those who looked closely. She began to understand that the land had not abandoned her, it had been whispering lessons she was too fearful to hear. One evening, as the sun bled red over the horizon, Clara dared to whisper, "Why did you stay?" Chayton looked at her for a long time. His English was halting, but clear. "No one left," should be alone, her throat closed. She clutched her boys tighter, the firelight painting their small faces. For the first time since they were born, she felt a thread of hope, but hope is fragile, and the desert is never done testing the living. For when they reached the edge of an old trail, dust rising in the distance, Clara's heart stopped. It was not her husband returning, but a band of riders, settlers men she recognized from the wagon train. Their eyes lit with suspicion as they spotted her beside the Sioux man. Their whispers carried the same venom she had long endured, left her for dead. And look what she found. Indians got her, now his brats too. Shameful, Clara's heart thundered. Caught between two worlds, both ready to judge. The riders dismounted, boots striking the dust like gavel blows. Their leader, Silas Boone, a man of sharp jaw and sharper tongue, stepped forward. He had always measured Clara with disdain, his voice a steady drip of scorn when her steps faltered. Along the trail, now his smirk widened. Well, looks like the desert took her pride and she gave herself to a red man's mercy. The words sliced deeper than the sunburn on her skin. Clara wanted to speak, to defend herself, but shame clamped her jaw. Chayton stood tall, his bow lowered, but his presence unyielding. The rider's eyes flicked between him and Clara, hands resting near their pistols. Clara felt her sons stir against her chest. She could not allow their lives to begin beneath sneers and violence. Something shifted within her then, something born of every night she had endured, every step she had bled upon the dust. She lifted her chin. This man saved me, while you rode on without looking back. Her voice trembled, but it carried. You left me to die, Silas Boone, my husband. He left too, but this man he stayed. The air thickened. Boone sneered. You think anyone will believe a woman who lays with a savage? Her cheeks burned, but she did not lower her gaze. Instead, she turned to Chayton, and though words were scarce between them, her eyes spoke, do not yield. Not for me, not for them. The riders shifted uneasily. Some muttered, some spat. Boone's hand twitched near his revolver. Then the cry of an infant pierced the silence, high and fierce. James, Eli stirred too, his tiny fist flailing. That sound cracked a moment wide open. Chayton moved then not toward violence, but toward grace. He knelt beside Clara and adjusted the blanket around the children with careful hands. As though the world's judgment could not touch what was sacred between them, the riders faltered. Even Boone's sneer quivered, for in that act they saw, not conquest, not scandal, but the plain truth of survival and care. Still, Boone's pride demanded fire. His hand snapped to his revolver, steel flashing. Clara gasped, but Chayton was faster. His bowstring sang, and an arrow split the dust at Boone's boots. Not to kill, but to warn. The message was clear. He would defend, but he would not strike. First silence stretched. Then one of the younger riders, shifting uneasily, muttered, Leave it. Boone, she's alive. That's more'n we thought. Murmurs spread. The men mounted again, uneasy with the shame Clara's words had sown among them. Boone cursed under his breath, but turned his horse. Dust swallowed their shapes until only the horizon remained. When they were gone, Clara's knees gave out. She sank into the sand, clutching her children, tears spilling like rain after drought. Chayton knelt beside her, his hand hovering near her shoulder, hesitant. She looked up, her eyes raw, and then slowly, deliberately she reached for his hand and placed it over her heart. No words were needed. He had seen her in her most broken hour and stood unshaken. She had found, in the silence of his care, a strength no sneer could take from her. The days that followed wove them closer. Clara learned to walk with steady breath, to gather roots, to carry her sons while he hunted. Chayton taught her to listen not only to the wind, but to the quiet within herself. One evening, the twins nestled safe. Clara and Chayton sat by the fire. The desert glowed soft, painted in lavender twilight. She whispered, more to the night than to him. I thought I was meant to perish here, but maybe I was meant to begin again. Chayton's gaze lingered on her, steady as always. He did not speak, but the fire between them told her she was no longer unseen. And so, dear listener, remember this. Life will sometimes strip you bare, leave you cast aside in the desert of judgment and loss. But grace can come in the quietest. Forms a hand extended, a fire built, a heart that stays when all others leave. Dignity is not given by those who sneer, it is found in how you rise again, how you choose to see yourself when the dust settles. May we all find the courage to drink from the waters offered and the gentleness to offer them in turn. And so, dear listener, remember this. Life has a way of stripping us bare, of casting us out into the lonely deserts of judgment, sorrow, and loss. Yet in those barren places, grace often arrives softly through a hand that steadies us, a fire, kindled against the dark, a heart that remains when all others have turned away. True dignity is not granted by the voices that scorn us. It is forged in how we choose to rise, how we decide to see ourselves when the dust finally settles. May you find the courage to drink deeply of the waters offered to you, and the gentleness to become that offering for another.